There is a strange moment that happens sometimes in the middle of a busy day. Maybe you're sitting at your desk, emails are coming in, notifications keep appearing, your mind is moving quickly from one thought to the next. And for a second, just a second, everything stops. You pause. No scrolling, no reacting, no rushing, just silence. And in that small moment of quiet, something unexpected happens. Your thinking becomes clearer. The problem that felt overwhelming suddenly seems simpler. The decision that felt confusing suddenly feels obvious. It's almost as if the answer was always there, hidden underneath all the noise. Now here is the strange part. Most of us are taught the exact opposite. We grow up believing that success belongs to the busiest people, the ones who move the fastest, the ones whose minds never seem to stop. The world rewards speed, it rewards constant activity, and because of that, many people assume that a busy mind is a productive mind. But when you start studying how the brain actually works, a very different picture appears. Some of the most effective thinkers in the world share a surprising trait. They are not the most frantic. They are not the most mentally overloaded. They are often the calmest people in the room. Elite athletes, before a decisive moment, don't fill their minds with more thoughts. They slow their breathing. Great leaders, before making an important decision, don't rush. They pause. Even the most successful investors often describe their thinking process in one simple word: quiet. Because when the mind becomes calm, something powerful happens inside the brain. Attention sharpens, emotions settle, clarity rises, and suddenly, you are no longer reacting to life, you are directing it. In a world full of noise, the ability to create inner stillness becomes something rare, and rare qualities often become powerful advantages. This audiobook is about that advantage. Over the next hour, we are going to explore the science behind inner stillness and why calm minds consistently outperform busy ones. You will discover why a restless mind often feels productive but actually makes weaker decisions, why mental noise quietly drains your focus and energy, and how the simple ability to slow your mind down can dramatically improve the way you think, act, and perform in everyday life. But this is not about becoming passive. Stillness is not the absence of action. In fact, the opposite is true. When the mind becomes quiet, action becomes sharper. When the mind becomes calm, discipline becomes easier. And when the internal noise disappears, you begin to see your life with a level of clarity that many people rarely experience. Think about the people you admire the most. Very often, they share a certain presence. They don't rush their words. They don't panic under pressure. They move with a kind of quiet confidence, not because they know everything, but because their minds are not drowning in noise. And the beautiful thing is, this kind of inner stillness is not something reserved for monks or philosophers. It is a skill, a trainable state of mind, something that anyone can begin developing with awareness and practice. And once you begin to experience it, even in small moments, you start to notice a shift. Decisions become clearer. Stress loses its grip. Your attention becomes stronger. Life starts to feel less chaotic and far more intentional. So wherever you are right now, maybe you're listening while working, maybe you're driving, maybe you're relaxing late at night, take a moment and just slow down with me. Let your mind settle for a second, because this next hour might change the way you think about your mind and the quiet power that has been inside it all along. And before we begin, I'd love to know something about you. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop a comment below and tell me which city you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how people from different places around the world can come together around the same ideas, the same search for clarity, and the same desire to live with a calmer, stronger mind. So take a second, say hello, and tell us where you're listening from. Now, Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why a busy mind feels productive but performs worse. A man once described the most exhausting day of his life. He woke up early, checked emails before even leaving his bed, answered messages during breakfast, took calls on the way to work. His entire day was filled with meetings, decisions, conversations, and constant problem solving. By the evening, his mind felt completely drained. But when he finally sat down and looked back at the day, something bothered him. Almost nothing truly important had been accomplished. He had been active for 12 straight hours. His mind had been working non-stop. Yet the things that actually mattered, the decisions that required clear thinking, had barely moved forward. If that experience sounds familiar, it's because millions of people are living the same pattern every single day, in a mind that feels extremely busy, but strangely ineffective. This reveals one of the most powerful illusions of modern life, the illusion that mental activity equals productivity. In today's world, busyness has become a symbol of importance. People admire packed schedules, someone who is constantly responding to messages, switching between tasks, and thinking about multiple problems at once often appears productive. But beneath that appearance, something very different is happening inside the brain. The human mind was never designed to function in a state of continuous stimulation. For most of human history, attention worked very differently. When our ancestors focused on something, their attention narrowed. They tracked one animal through the forest. They built one tool. They solved one problem at a time. So their minds operated like a focused beam of light. But modern life scatters that beam. Every notification pulls attention away. Every message interrupts concentration. Every new piece of information competes for mental space. At first, these interruptions seem harmless. A quick glance at the phone, a fast reply to an email, a short shift from one task to another. But something subtle happens every time attention moves. The brain must reset. It must remember what it was doing. Rebuild the context of the task. Recover the thread of thought it had just lost. Psychologists call this attention switching, and each switch quietly drains cognitive energy. The mind may feel active, but its efficiency begins to drop. Imagine trying to read a book while someone turns the lights off and on every few seconds. You could technically keep reading, but your comprehension would suffer, your concentration would weaken, and eventually the effort would become exhausting. This is how many minds operate today, not because people lack intelligence or discipline, but because their attention is constantly being interrupted. And the brain pays a price for that interruption. Researchers have found that after a distraction, it can take several minutes for the mind to fully return to the same level of focus it had before. Now imagine that happening dozens of times throughout the day. The result is a mind that feels extremely busy, yet rarely reaches its full capacity. This is why many people end their workdays feeling strangely unsatisfied. They were mentally active the entire time. But deep progress never happened, because deep progress requires something modern life rarely allows: calm focus. If you watch people who perform at extremely high levels, you begin to notice a surprising pattern. They are not constantly frantic. In fact, they often appear unusually calm. Consider a professional athlete moments before a major competition. While the crowd roars and tension fills the stadium, the athlete does something unexpected. They slow their breathing. They center their attention. They quiet the noise in their mind. Why? Because precision requires clarity. A chaotic mind cannot coordinate complex action. A calm mind can. The same pattern appears in many fields. Watch a surgeon preparing for a delicate procedure. Watch a pilot navigating turbulence. Watch a chess grandmaster studying the board. Their movements are deliberate. Their thoughts are controlled. They are not mentally scattered. They are mentally steady. And this steadiness is not accidental. It is the result of a brain operating in its optimal state. When the mind becomes calm, the brain's executive functions begin to work more effectively. Attention strengthens, emotional reactivity decreases, pattern recognition improves. Instead of reacting to every signal, the brain begins filtering information intelligently. Important details stand out, irrelevant noise fades, and suddenly, thinking becomes clearer. This is the fundamental difference between a busy mind and a focused mind. A busy mind reacts. A focused mind directs. The busy mind chases every stimulus that appears. The focused mind chooses where its energy goes. And over time, that difference shapes everything. It shapes the quality of decisions. It shapes the depth of work. It shapes the level of performance a person can sustain. Many people try to improve productivity by pushing themselves harder. They try to think faster, work longer, respond quicker. But the most effective minds often move in the opposite direction. They slow down internally. They protect their attention. They create moments of stillness where their thinking can stabilize. And from that calm foundation, their actions become sharper, more precise, more powerful. In the chapters ahead, we will explore why this quiet mental state has such a powerful effect on performance. We will look at the science of how calm thinking improves decision-making, how mental noise drains cognitive energy, and how developing inner stillness can transform the way your mind operates. Because once you begin to understand how attention truly works, something important starts to change. You stop trying to force your mind into constant activity, and instead, you begin learning how to guide it. And that shift from a mind that constantly reacts to one that calmly directs may be one of the most powerful transformations a person can experience in a noisy world. Chapter 2. The surprising way silence improves brain function. Several years ago, a group of researchers ran a simple but fascinating experiment. They invited participants into a quiet room and asked them to perform a series of cognitive tasks. Things like memory challenges, pattern recognition, and problem-solving exercises. At first, the participants worked in a normal environment. Background sounds were present. Occasional interruptions occurred. The room felt similar to the everyday world most people are used to. Then something changed. The researchers removed almost all external noise. Phones were taken away. No background conversations, no music, no interruptions. Just silence. The participants repeated the same mental tasks again. And something interesting happened. Their brains performed better. Reaction times improved. Mistakes decreased. Complex patterns were recognized more quickly. The change was not dramatic in appearance, but it was consistent. When the mind entered a quieter environment, cognitive performance improved. Why would something as simple as silence have such an effect? The answer lies deep inside the brain. To understand it, we need to look at one of the most important systems responsible for thinking and decision-making, the prefrontal cortex. This area sits just behind your forehead, and it acts like the brain's executive control center. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for planning, decision-making, self-control, focus, long-term thinking. When you carefully analyze a problem or resist an impulsive reaction, it is this part of the brain doing the work. But the prefrontal cortex has a weakness, and it does not perform well under constant stress and stimulation. When the brain becomes overloaded with noise, urgency, and emotional pressure, a different system begins to take control. This system is older and more primitive. It reacts quickly. It prioritizes speed over accuracy, and its primary goal is survival, not thoughtful decision-making. In other words, when the mind becomes chaotic, the brain shifts into a more reactive mode. You've probably experienced this yourself. Imagine receiving an upsetting message late at night. Before fully thinking, your mind starts racing. Thoughts jump quickly from one interpretation to another. Your heart rate rises slightly. You feel the urge to respond immediately. In that moment, the brain is not operating from calm, deliberate reasoning. It is operating from emotional reaction. And emotional reactions rarely produce the clearest thinking. Now imagine a different situation. Instead of responding immediately, you pause, you take a breath, you allow your mind to settle for a few minutes. Then you read the message again. Often, the situation suddenly appears different. Something that felt urgent now seems manageable. Something that felt personal now seems less threatening. The difference is not the message itself. The difference is the state of the mind interpreting it. When the brain is calm, the prefrontal cortex regains control, and when that happens, thinking becomes more balanced. Psychologists sometimes describe this shift as moving from reactive thinking to reflective thinking. Reactive thinking is fast and emotional. Reflective thinking is slower but more accurate. Silence plays an important role in allowing the brain to make that shift. When external noise decreases, internal activity begins to settle. The brain no longer has to process endless stimuli. Attention becomes steadier. Mental energy becomes available for deeper thinking. And something remarkable begins to happen. The brain starts connecting information in more creative ways. You may have noticed this effect during simple moments in daily life. Sometimes the solution to a problem appears while you're taking a walk, or while standing in the shower, or while driving quietly without distractions. These moments of insight often appear when the mind is not overloaded. The brain finally has space to process information. Researchers sometimes refer to this as default mode processing, a state where the brain organizes thoughts, reviews experiences, and makes new connections. Interestingly, this mode becomes more active when external stimulation decreases. In other words, silence gives the brain room to think, but modern life rarely allows this state to appear. Many people fill every quiet moment with stimulation. Music while working, podcasts while commuting, social media while waiting in line. Even brief moments of silence can feel uncomfortable, but the brain does not interpret constant stimulation as productivity. It interprets it as workload. Every sound, message, and piece of information requires processing. And the more the brain processes, the more mental energy it consumes. This is why mental exhaustion often appears even when physical effort is minimal. The brain has simply been working too hard to filter noise. When silence appears, something different happens. The mind slows down, thoughts become more organized, and attention becomes sharper. This is why many high performers intentionally create moments of silence throughout their day. Some take short breaks without any stimulation. Some practice quiet breathing exercises before important decisions. Others simply step away from their devices long enough for their minds to reset. These small moments of stillness are not wasted time. They are cognitive recovery. They allow the brain's most advanced systems to return online, and when that happens, performance improves naturally. Decisions become clearer, focus becomes stronger, and mental energy lasts longer. In a world filled with constant information, silence may feel unusual, but biologically, it is one of the brain's most supportive environments. The mind was not built for endless noise. It was built for periods of focus, followed by moments of quiet reflection. When those quiet moments return, thinking begins to change. And as we will see in the next chapter, this change affects something even more important than focus. It changes the quality of the decisions we make every single day. Chapter 3. Why calm minds make better decisions. Under pressure. One evening, a senior airline pilot was asked a simple question during an interview. Out of the thousands of hours you've spent flying, what was the most important skill you developed? People expected a technical answer. Navigation, aircraft systems, emergency procedures. Instead, The pilot said something unexpected. "The most important skill," he explained, "is staying calm when everything around you becomes chaotic." He then described a moment that happened years earlier during a flight. The aircraft had suddenly entered severe turbulence. Warning lights appeared on the dashboard. Multiple systems required attention at the same time. Passengers in the cabin began to panic. Inside the cockpit, alarms sounded. In situations like that, every second matters, and a pilot could react emotionally, rushing through decisions, trying to fix everything at once, or the pilot could slow down internally. Breathe. Prioritize. Focus on the most important action first. The difference between those two responses often determines the outcome of the situation, and this principle extends far beyond aviation. Many of the most important decisions in life are made under pressure: a difficult conversation with a colleague, a financial decision involving risk. A moment when emotions rise quickly and the urge to react feels strong. In those moments, the state of the mind becomes more important than the information available. Two people can face the exact same situation. One reacts impulsively. The other pauses, evaluates, and responds with clarity. Over time, those small differences create very different lives. Why does calmness improve decision-making so dramatically? The answer again lies inside the brain. When pressure rises, the brain activates a system designed for rapid survival responses. This system prepares the body to react quickly. Heart rate increases. Attention narrows. Emotions intensify. This response was extremely useful for our ancestors. If a threat appeared suddenly in the environment, quick reactions could save a life. But modern challenges rarely require that kind of reflexive response. Most problems today require thoughtful judgment rather than immediate action. Yet the brain still triggers the same survival mechanisms. And when those mechanisms dominate, thinking becomes less flexible. Psychologists often describe this effect as cognitive narrowing. When stress rises, and the brain begins focusing only on the most obvious signals, peripheral information disappears from awareness. Options seem limited. Solutions appear fewer. This is why people under pressure sometimes make decisions they later regret. The mind was not operating from clarity, it was operating from urgency. Calmness interrupts that process. When the mind slows down, the nervous system begins shifting out of emergency mode. Breathing steadies, muscle tension decreases, and the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for thoughtful reasoning, regains control. When that happens, something important changes. The brain begins expanding its perception of the situation. More possibilities appear. More subtle details become visible. Instead of reacting to the first interpretation that arises, the mind begins evaluating alternatives. In psychology, this is sometimes called cognitive space. Calmness creates space between stimulus and response, and inside that space, better decisions become possible. Consider a situation many people experience. You receive an email that feels unfair or critical. Your first reaction might be emotional, perhaps frustration, perhaps defensiveness. The impulse appears quickly. Respond immediately and defend yourself. If the response is sent in that emotional state, the conversation may escalate. But imagine a different reaction. You read the message. You pause. You step away from the computer for a few minutes. When you return, the message may look different. Perhaps the tone was misunderstood. Perhaps the issue is smaller than it first appeared. Perhaps the best response is calmer and more strategic. The external situation did not change, and only the state of the mind interpreting it changed. And that small shift can dramatically alter the outcome. This ability to pause may seem simple, but it represents one of the most powerful forms of mental discipline. Because the mind is naturally drawn toward immediate reaction. Our brains evolved to respond quickly to perceived threats or challenges. But thoughtful decision-making requires the opposite skill, the ability to delay reaction long enough for clarity to appear. Many high performers develop habits that support this ability. Some take a few slow breaths before making important decisions. Some deliberately pause during tense conversations. Others step away from situations briefly to allow their minds to settle. These actions may appear small from the outside, but internally they change the entire cognitive process. The brain moves from reaction to reflection, and reflection produces wiser decisions. Over the course of a lifetime, the quality of decisions shapes almost everything. Career direction, relationships, financial stability, personal well-being. And because so many important decisions occur under emotional pressure, the ability to remain calm becomes a powerful advantage. It allows the mind to see clearly while others react impulsively. It allows a person to evaluate options while others become overwhelmed. And perhaps most importantly, it allows someone to respond intentionally instead of automatically. A calm mind does not eliminate pressure. Life will always present difficult moments. Unexpected problems will appear, and emotions will rise. But calmness changes how the mind moves through those moments. Instead of rushing toward the first reaction, it pauses. Instead of narrowing perception, it expands it. Instead of reacting, it chooses. And that difference between reaction and choice may be one of the most important distinctions a human mind can develop. Because when calmness becomes a habit, decisions begin to change. And as we will explore in the next chapter, this shift becomes even more powerful when we understand something else affecting the modern mind every day. The hidden cost of constant mental noise. Chapter 4. The invisible cost of living in constant mental noise. There is a strange habit many people have developed without even realizing it. The moment silence appears, they fill it. Waiting in line at a store, they reach for their phone. Sitting alone for a few minutes, they open social media. Driving somewhere, they turn on music or a podcast. Silence, even for a brief moment, begins to feel uncomfortable. The modern mind has become so used to constant stimulation that quiet moments almost feel unnatural. But something important is happening during those silent moments. Something the brain actually needs. And when silence disappears entirely from daily life, the brain begins paying a hidden price. That price is mental noise. Mental noise is not simply sound. It is the constant stream of unfinished thoughts, information, worries, silent stimuli that occupy the mind throughout the day. Messages to respond to. News headlines demanding attention. Notifications flashing on screens. Ideas competing for focus. Each one may seem small on its own, but together they create an environment where the mind rarely experiences stillness. Imagine walking into a crowded room where hundreds of conversations are happening at once. Voices overlap. Some are loud, some are quiet, but all of them compete for your attention. Eventually, your mind begins to feel tired, not because you were speaking, but because your brain was trying to filter everything it heard. The modern digital environment functions in a very similar way. Even when you are not actively thinking about something, the brain is constantly processing signals. A message arrives, a notification appears. A piece of information catches your attention for a few seconds before disappearing. Each stimulus triggers a small shift in attention. Individually, these shifts feel insignificant, but over time they accumulate, and the brain begins to experience something researchers call cognitive overload. Cognitive overload occurs when the brain receives more information than it can effectively organize and process. When this happens, attention weakens, memory becomes less reliable, decision-making becomes slower, and mental fatigue increases. Interestingly, this fatigue often appears even when the person has not done physically demanding work. Someone might spend an entire day sitting at a desk, yet feel mentally exhausted by evening. The brain has simply been working non-stop to filter noise. But the hidden cost of mental noise goes even deeper. So when the brain is constantly stimulated, it rarely enters the deeper cognitive states required for meaningful thinking. Remember the moments we discussed earlier, the times when solutions suddenly appear during quiet activities like walking or showering. Those insights occur because the brain finally has space to connect ideas. When the mind becomes overloaded, that space disappears. Thoughts remain scattered on the surface instead of forming deeper patterns. In other words, mental noise blocks mental clarity. This is one reason creativity often struggles in environments filled with constant stimulation. The brain cannot produce original insights while simultaneously reacting to endless input. It needs periods of quiet processing. Many writers, scientists, and thinkers throughout history have intuitively understood this, and they often created deliberate space for silence. Long walks, quiet rooms, moments without conversation or interruption. These environments allowed their minds to move beyond surface-level thinking. Today, however, the opposite environment has become normal. Constant updates, constant alerts, constant information. The brain remains in a state of continuous partial attention, aware of many things but deeply focused on none. This state can feel productive because the mind is always engaged, but engagement is not the same as depth. Depth requires stillness. Another subtle effect of mental noise appears in emotional life. When the mind never slows down, emotions have less time to settle. Small frustrations linger. Anxieties repeat. Thoughts circle endlessly without resolution. Silence allows emotions to stabilize. Without it, so emotional tension can accumulate quietly in the background. Over time, this contributes to the feeling many people describe as mental overwhelm. Not because life has become impossible, but because the mind has not had enough quiet space to process experiences. The brain, like any complex system, requires periods of recovery. Just as muscles need rest after physical exertion, the mind needs moments of reduced stimulation. Without those moments, performance gradually declines. Focus becomes weaker. Patience becomes shorter. And clarity becomes harder to reach. This is why some of the most productive individuals intentionally reduce mental noise in their lives. They limit unnecessary information. They protect blocks of uninterrupted time. They step away from devices long enough for their minds to reset. These habits are not about rejecting modern technology. They are about managing the brain's limited cognitive resources. Attention is one of the most valuable resources the mind possesses. Where attention goes, energy follows. And when attention becomes scattered across endless stimuli, energy becomes scattered as well. But when attention becomes concentrated, something powerful happens. Thoughts begin to align, ideas become clearer, decisions become simpler. In a world filled with constant signals competing for attention, the ability to reduce mental noise becomes a quiet advantage. It allows the brain to return to its natural rhythm, focus, reflect, act, then rest again. This rhythm supported human thinking for thousands of years, and although the modern environment has changed dramatically, the brain itself remains largely the same. It still thrives in moments of calm attention. It still performs best when noise decreases. And as we will discover in the next chapter, many of the world's highest performers have learned to use this principle intentionally. They understand something that may seem counterintuitive at first. Sometimes the fastest path to powerful action begins with slowing the mind down. Chapter 5. The Calm Secret Shared by Elite Performers. If you observe people performing at an extremely high level, something surprising often appears. They rarely look rushed. In fact, many of them appear almost unusually calm. This pattern can be seen across many different fields. Elite athletes preparing for competition, special forces, soldiers entering dangerous situations, surgeons performing delicate operations, professional chess players studying the board before a decisive move. From the outside, their environments may be intense. Pressure is high. Consequences are serious. Mistakes can be costly. Yet inside these moments, the individuals themselves often display a remarkable level of calm. Their movements are controlled, their breathing is steady, their attention appears completely focused. This calmness is not a coincidence. It is a deliberate strategy, because when performance truly matters, a chaotic mind becomes a liability. Consider the experience of an Olympic archer standing at the shooting line. Thousands of people may be watching. The pressure of competition fills the stadium, but the athlete cannot afford a racing mind. If attention jumps toward the crowd, toward expectations, toward the fear of failure, even slightly, the shot becomes unstable. So before releasing the arrow, the athlete does something subtle. They slow their breathing, they narrow their attention, they allow their mind to become still. From the outside, the movement looks simple, but internally, the athlete has shifted the brain into a state of calm concentration. Only from that state can precision appear. The same principle appears in professions far removed from sports. And take the example of emergency medicine. When a patient arrives in critical condition, doctors must make rapid decisions under intense pressure. The environment can be loud and chaotic. Multiple people speak at once. Alarms sound. Family members may be anxious or frightened. Yet the most effective physicians often display an almost surprising calm. They speak slowly. They give clear instructions. They focus on one priority at a time. Because they understand something fundamental about the human mind. When attention becomes scattered, errors increase. When attention becomes steady, performance improves. Calmness allows the brain to operate at its highest level. This is why many high performers train their minds to enter calm states deliberately. Special forces, soldiers, for example, spend significant time practicing breathing techniques. And in high-stress training environments, they learn to slow their breathing in order to stabilize their nervous systems. This simple action lowers heart rate, reduces stress hormones, and restores cognitive control. A calm body supports a calm mind, and a calm mind supports clear decisions. Elite athletes follow similar principles. Before competition, many athletes practice visualization. They mentally rehearse their performance in quiet concentration. They imagine each movement clearly. This mental rehearsal strengthens neural pathways in the brain, preparing the body to execute actions smoothly when the real moment arrives. But just as importantly, visualization calms the mind. It reduces uncertainty. It creates familiarity with the upcoming challenge, and familiarity reduces fear. Even in fields like business and entrepreneurship, a similar pattern appears. Successful leaders often describe moments when major decisions required them to step back and clear their minds. Instead of reacting immediately to pressure, they pause. They create distance from the noise of the moment. And in that quiet space, they consider the situation from a broader perspective. This pause may last only a few minutes, but those minutes can dramatically improve the quality of the decision. Because calm thinking allows the brain to process information more effectively. When the mind becomes steady, attention narrows toward what truly matters. Distractions lose their power. Emotions settle. Clarity increases. Over time, many high performers develop routines designed specifically to create this calm mental state. Some wake up early in the morning before the world becomes noisy. Others take quiet walks before beginning important work. Some practice meditation or controlled breathing to reset their attention. These routines may appear simple, but their impact is profound. They protect the mind from unnecessary noise. They create a stable foundation for focused thinking. And they train the brain to return to calmness even during stressful situations. Interestingly, the goal is not to eliminate pressure entirely. Pressure is often unavoidable. Competition, deadlines, and difficult decisions are part of life. The real skill lies in maintaining internal stability while external pressure increases. When this ability develops, something powerful begins to happen. Stressful situations stop feeling overwhelming. Challenges become manageable. The mind begins to trust its ability to remain clear even when the environment becomes chaotic. And that confidence alone can dramatically improve performance. Because the brain no longer wastes energy fighting panic. Instead, it channels energy toward problem solving and action. The calm mind becomes efficient. It sees what matters. It ignores what does not. It moves directly toward the solution. This is why the calmest person in a room often holds more influence than the loudest one. Calm signals control. It communicates stability, and stability allows others to trust that decisions are being made thoughtfully rather than impulsively. Over time, this quality becomes a quiet form of leadership. People naturally look toward the individual who remains steady when others become reactive. And as we move into the next chapter, we will explore something even more practical. If calmness improves performance so dramatically, how can it be trained? How can an ordinary person develop the same ability to slow the mind down and regain control of attention? Because the truth is encouraging. Calmness is not a personality trait reserved for a few fortunate individuals. It is a mental skill. And like any skill, it can be practiced and strengthened. Chapter 6. Training your mind to think slower, but act faster. Many people believe that improving performance requires pushing the mind harder. They try to think faster, work longer hours, respond more quickly to every demand that appears. The assumption seems logical. If speed leads to more activity and activity leads to results, then moving faster should create better outcomes. But when you observe how highly effective people actually operate, a different pattern begins to emerge. The most effective minds often slow down before they act. They pause. They think deliberately. They allow their attention to settle before making a decision. And from that slower internal pace, their actions often become faster, clearer, and more precise. This may sound like a contradiction at first. How can slowing down the mind produce faster results? The answer lies in how the brain organizes attention. When the mind is rushed, thoughts tend to scatter. Attention jumps between possibilities. Important details may be overlooked. Decisions become reactive rather than strategic. In this state, action may begin quickly, but mistakes often follow. Corrections must be made. Energy becomes wasted. Time disappears. But when the mind slows down, something different happens. Attention stabilizes. Thoughts begin forming in a more organized sequence. Instead of reacting to the first impulse, the brain evaluates multiple possibilities. From the outside, this may look like hesitation, but internally, it is actually preparation. And preparation creates efficiency. Imagine an experienced craftsman working with delicate tools. Before making a precise cut, the craftsman pauses. They study the material. They position the tool carefully. Only then do they move. The action itself may take only a second, but the calm preparation behind that action ensures accuracy. Without that preparation, the result would likely require correction. The same principle applies to thinking. A calm moment of mental preparation often prevents long periods of confusion later. This is why many professionals who operate in high-pressure environments train themselves to slow their minds intentionally. Take the example of emergency responders. When a crisis occurs, the environment can quickly become chaotic. People shout instructions, information arrives rapidly, emotions rise. Yet experienced responders often follow a simple rule. Pause before acting. Even if the pause lasts only a few seconds, it allows the brain to prioritize the most important task. And instead of reacting to everything at once, attention becomes focused on the critical step. And that focus saves time. Because focused action rarely needs correction, the same principle applies to everyday life. Many mistakes occur not because people lack intelligence, but because they move too quickly through decisions. A rushed email creates misunderstanding. A rushed financial decision leads to regret. A rushed reaction damages a relationship. Slowing the mind by even a small amount can dramatically change these outcomes. This ability to slow internal thinking is a skill that can be trained. One of the simplest ways to begin is through conscious breathing. Breathing has a powerful influence on the nervous system. When breathing becomes slow and steady, the body interprets this as a signal of safety. Heart rate decreases. Stress hormones begin to drop, and the brain shifts back toward calm cognitive processing. Even a few slow breaths can create noticeable changes in mental clarity. This is why many high performers use breathing techniques before important moments. Athletes do it before competition. Public speakers do it before stepping onto a stage. Surgeons do it before beginning complex procedures. These breaths are not random. They are deliberate resets for the mind. Another powerful training method involves single-task focus. In modern life, multitasking is often celebrated, but the brain does not truly perform multiple complex tasks at the same time. Instead, it rapidly switches attention between them. Each switch carries a cognitive cost. Single-task focus eliminates that cost. When attention stays with one task long enough to complete it, and thinking becomes deeper and more efficient, the mind no longer wastes energy constantly reorienting itself. Instead, it moves smoothly from one completed action to the next. Many people discover that when they practice single-task focus, their productivity actually increases. Not because they are working faster, but because their thinking becomes clearer. Another helpful practice involves deliberate pauses throughout the day. A brief walk without stimulation, a few minutes of quiet breathing, a moment to step away from screens. These pauses allow the brain to reset its attention. Instead of accumulating mental noise throughout the day, the mind periodically clears itself. Over time, these small practices create a powerful change in how the brain operates. The mind becomes less reactive. Attention stabilizes more quickly. Clarity appears sooner when challenges arise. And perhaps most importantly, the brain becomes comfortable with calmness. Silence no longer feels uncomfortable. Stillness begins to feel natural. This shift is subtle, but its effects can be dramatic. Because when the mind learns how to slow down internally, actions become more intentional. Decisions become more thoughtful. Energy becomes directed rather than scattered. In a world that constantly pushes the mind towards speed and stimulation, the ability to slow thinking becomes a rare skill. But it is also a powerful one. Because the goal of a calm mind is not inactivity, it is precision. And precision allows actions to move quickly without becoming chaotic. The mind becomes like a steady compass. It does not rush. It simply points in the right direction. And once direction becomes clear, progress often happens much faster than before. In the next chapter, we will explore how developing this calm internal state becomes something even deeper than a technique. Over time, it becomes a form of discipline, one that strengthens the mind in ways that extend far beyond focus or productivity. Chapter 7. Why inner silence is a form of mental discipline. At first glance, calmness can appear effortless. Some people seem naturally composed. They speak slowly. They do not react quickly to stress. Their presence feels steady. From the outside, it may look like a personality trait. But in many cases, calmness is not personality. It is discipline. Because maintaining inner silence in the modern world requires intention. Think about how the average day unfolds for many people. The morning often begins with a phone. Before the mind fully wakes up, it is already processing messages, notifications, and information from the outside world. Emails, news, social media, opinions, problems, expectations. Before the day even truly begins, the mind is already crowded. This pattern continues throughout the day. A constant stream of signals competes for attention: work responsibilities, conversations, digital alerts, background noise, and without realizing it, the brain slowly adapts to this environment. Attention becomes reactive. Thoughts begin moving faster. The mind becomes accustomed to stimulation. Over time, silence can begin to feel uncomfortable. When the environment becomes quiet, the mind instinctively looks for something to fill the space: a phone, a conversation, a distraction. This is why developing inner silence is not passive. It requires a deliberate choice. The choice to protect attention, the choice to allow moments of quiet, the choice to resist the constant pull of stimulation. In other words, it requires discipline. But discipline in this context does not mean force. It means awareness. See, it means noticing when attention begins drifting toward unnecessary noise and gently guiding it back. Many traditions throughout history recognized the value of this mental discipline long before modern neuroscience began studying it. Philosophers practiced periods of quiet reflection. Monks practiced meditation. Writers and thinkers sought solitude in order to deepen their thoughts. These practices were not escapes from the world. They were ways of strengthening the mind. Because when the mind learns how to rest in silence, it becomes less controlled by external events. Criticism becomes easier to process. Stress becomes easier to manage. Unexpected problems no longer produce immediate panic. Instead, the mind remains stable. And stability creates freedom. Freedom to choose how to respond rather than being controlled by impulse. So consider a situation many people encounter regularly. Someone says something frustrating during a conversation. The immediate reaction might be irritation, perhaps even anger. The mind begins forming responses instantly. Words rush forward. But a disciplined mind does something different. It pauses. Just for a moment. That pause may last only a second. But inside that second, something powerful happens. Emotion settles slightly. Perspective widens. And the response that follows becomes more thoughtful. That moment of restraint is not weakness. It is control. And control is one of the strongest forms of mental power a person can possess. Without it, the mind becomes reactive. Every comment triggers emotion. Every problem creates stress. Every challenge produces anxiety. But when discipline enters the mind, reactions begin to slow. The attention becomes steadier. Thoughts become clearer. This transformation rarely happens all at once. It develops gradually through repeated choices, choosing not to react immediately, choosing to step away from unnecessary noise, choosing to create small spaces of quiet within the day. At first, these choices may feel difficult. The mind has grown used to stimulation. It may resist silence, but with practice, the brain adapts. Moments of calm become easier to access. Attention returns more quickly after distraction. The nervous system learns how to settle. Over time, the calm mind becomes the default state rather than the exception. And when that happens, something interesting occurs. Life itself begins to feel different. Challenges remain, responsibilities remain, but the internal experience changes. Instead of feeling pulled in many directions, the mind feels grounded. Instead of reacting to every external signal, it chooses where attention goes. This ability creates a powerful sense of inner stability. And stability often leads to quiet confidence. Not the loud confidence that seeks attention, but a steady confidence that comes from knowing the mind can remain clear even in difficult situations. This is why inner silence often becomes a defining trait of strong leaders, skilled professionals, and thoughtful individuals. They are not free from pressure, but their minds are disciplined enough to remain calm within it. And that calmness influences everyone around them, because emotional states are contagious. When one person remains composed during stressful situations, others often begin to settle as well. The calm mind becomes an anchor, a point of stability within uncertainty. And this brings us to an important realization. Inner silence is not simply about personal well-being. It is also about influence. The ability to create calm within oneself can quietly shape the environment around you. Conversations become more thoughtful, decisions become clearer, conflicts lose some of their intensity. All because one mind remained steady. In the final chapter, we will explore what happens when this calm state becomes a permanent part of how a person moves through the world. Because when inner stillness becomes a habit, it transforms something deeper than productivity or focus. It transforms identity, so the mind no longer struggles against the noise of life. Instead, it moves through that noise with clarity, direction, and quiet strength. Chapter 8. When inner stillness becomes power, there is a quiet shift that happens when a person truly learns to develop inner stillness. At first, the change is subtle. The outside world looks the same. Responsibilities remain. Challenges still appear. Unexpected problems still arise. But internally, something has changed. The mind no longer feels pulled in every direction. Thoughts no longer rush uncontrollably from one concern to the next. Instead, attention becomes steady. And that steadiness creates something powerful. Clarity. When the mind is calm, situations that once felt overwhelming begin to look different. Problems that seemed complicated become easier to understand. Decisions that once caused stress begin to feel manageable. This does not happen because life suddenly becomes simple, but it happens because the mind is finally able to see clearly. For many people, the greatest difficulty in life is not the challenges themselves, it is the mental noise surrounding those challenges. Worry amplifies uncertainty. Fear exaggerates risk. Constant thinking creates confusion. But when the mind becomes quiet, these distortions begin to fade. Reality becomes easier to interpret, and when reality becomes clear, action becomes simpler. This is why inner stillness often leads to a kind of quiet confidence. Not the loud confidence that demands attention, not the kind that tries to prove something to others, but a steady confidence that comes from knowing the mind can remain stable even in uncertain situations. A person with this kind of calm does not panic easily. When difficulties appear, they pause, they observe, they think, and then they act. This pattern may seem small, but over time it produces enormous differences, because life is shaped by decisions, and decisions are shaped by the state of the mind making them. A reactive mind often chooses quickly, but not always wisely. A calm mind chooses deliberately, and deliberate choices tend to lead toward better outcomes. But the influence of inner stillness extends beyond personal decision-making. It also affects how others perceive and respond to you. Human beings are extremely sensitive to emotional signals. We instinctively notice when someone appears anxious, reactive, or unstable. And we also notice when someone remains calm and composed. A calm presence communicates something powerful. It suggests control. It suggests clarity. It suggests that this person can be trusted in uncertain situations. But this is why calm individuals often become natural sources of stability within groups. In stressful meetings, people listen more closely to the calm voice in the room. During moments of crisis, others often look toward the person who appears most composed. Even without speaking loudly, calmness carries influence, because it signals that the mind is not being controlled by the chaos of the moment. Instead, it remains grounded. Over time, this quality can shape leadership, not leadership based on authority or force, but leadership based on trust. People feel safer when someone nearby appears calm. They feel more confident when decisions come from a mind that is not rushing or panicking. This is the quiet power of inner stillness. It does not need to announce itself. It simply appears through behavior, through the way a person listens before speaking, through the way they pause before reacting, through the way they maintain perspective when situations become intense. But perhaps the most important transformation occurs internally. When inner stillness becomes a habit, the relationship a person has with their own mind begins to change. Thoughts still appear, emotions still rise, but they no longer dominate attention in the same way. Instead of being carried away by every passing thought, the mind begins observing them. A worry appears, it is noticed, but it doesn't immediately control behavior. An emotional reaction arises. It is acknowledged, but it doesn't automatically dictate the next action. This distance between thought and action is one of the most powerful forms of mental freedom. It allows a person to respond intentionally rather than automatically. And once this ability develops, life begins to feel different, not because problems disappear, but because the mind no longer feels overwhelmed by them. Challenges become situations to navigate rather than threats to fear. Uncertainty becomes something to explore rather than something to avoid. And slowly, the mind develops resilience, a calm strength that does not depend on circumstances being perfect. Because circumstances will never be perfect, life will continue presenting unexpected changes. Moments of difficulty, moments of uncertainty, moments where emotions rise quickly. But a mind trained in stillness does not collapse under those moments. It remains steady, like a quiet lake that reflects the world clearly without becoming disturbed by every passing wind. And in that steady reflection, the mind sees more accurately, acts more wisely, lives more deliberately. This is the true power of inner stillness. Not escape, not withdrawal, but clarity. Clarity that allows a person to move through the noise of the world without becoming lost inside it. And once this clarity becomes part of how you think, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop chasing calm, and instead, calm begins to follow you wherever you go. The quiet advantage. Most people overlook. In a world that constantly celebrates speed, noise, and endless activity, the idea of inner stillness may seem unusual at first. We are often told that success belongs to those who move the fastest, work the longest hours, to keep their minds constantly engaged. But as we've explored throughout this audiobook, the reality is often very different. The mind performs best not when it is overwhelmed with activity, but when it is clear. A busy mind may feel productive, but it often becomes scattered. A calm mind, on the other hand, directs its energy with precision, and that difference changes everything. When the mind is calm, attention becomes stronger, decisions become more thoughtful, reactions slow down just enough for clarity to appear. Instead of being pushed around by every thought or emotion, you begin to guide your attention intentionally. That small shift from reaction to direction may be one of the most important mental transformations a person can experience. Over time, inner stillness begins to influence many parts of life. Work becomes more focused, conversations become more thoughtful. Challenges feel less overwhelming because the mind approaches them with steadiness rather than panic. And perhaps most importantly, a calm mind allows you to see situations as they truly are, rather than through the distortions of stress and noise. This clarity becomes a quiet advantage. Not an advantage built on force or constant effort, but one built on understanding how the mind actually works. Because once you realize that calmness strengthens thinking, something begins to change in how you approach daily life. You no longer feel the need to fill every moment with stimulation. You begin to protect small spaces of quiet, moments where the mind can breathe, moments where attention can settle. These moments may appear small, a few minutes of silence in the morning, and a short walk without distractions, a conscious pause before reacting to a stressful situation. Yet these small practices gradually retrain the mind. Attention becomes steadier, emotions become easier to manage, clarity begins appearing more often, and slowly, inner stillness stops feeling like something you must force. Instead, it becomes a natural state your mind can return to whenever needed. This does not mean life becomes free from difficulty. Unexpected challenges will still arise. Pressure will still appear. But when the mind has learned how to remain calm, those moments no longer feel overwhelming. They become situations you can observe, understand, and respond to with intention. Over time, this ability creates something deeper than productivity. It creates stability, a sense that your mind is no longer controlled by the chaos of the world around you. Instead, it moves through that chaos with clarity and quiet strength. And perhaps this is the most important realization of all. Inner stillness is not about withdrawing from life. It is about engaging with life more effectively. Because when the mind becomes quiet, perception becomes clearer. And when perception becomes clearer, your actions naturally become wiser. So as you move forward from this moment, remember something simple. You do not need to chase calm. You only need to create the conditions where calm can appear. A moment of silence, a conscious breath, a deliberate pause. These small moments can gradually reshape how the mind experiences the world. And in a world that often feels noisy and chaotic, so that quiet clarity may become one of the most powerful advantages you can develop. Thank you for spending this time here. And if this audiobook helped you slow your mind down, even for a few moments, then it has already begun to do its work.